Number 1. Asylum. This is a very old story, and I assume I am probably one of your oldest fans, in age, rather than time subscribed. I am a bit nervous about mentioning where this really happened, however. I know people who watch your channel, and they may figure out this is me, and I really don't want anyone to know. But many years ago, in another country, when I was a child, I was more than just a bit rowdy. I would have been what one would have called unruly. I think in today's time, they would have probably diagnosed me with ADHD. I do not know if I actually have that, but I understand why they would think so. I did put my parents through a lot of tormenting grief. It got worse, though, when I went into my early teenage years. I joined up with a gang of much older kids who were willing to just get into as much trouble as possible. Yes, we were involved in many crimes, and one of them included robbery, and we were caught. During the case, my parents were given a decision. Due to my constant unruliness and getting into trouble, there was an option that would be less of a legal burden on my parents. And that would be if I was to spend some time in an asylum in order to have a procedure done to me. I know some people will think that this sounds a bit hokey. Such things are not really practiced today, but long ago they definitely were. And I have not given you full examples of what I had put my parents through either. So I was placed into the asylum. I was told what the procedure was called, but I was very unfamiliar with the word at the time. However, although it wasn't common, it was being used on unruly children. There were several other boys in the room that I was in. We all had mattresses on the floor to sleep on. They weren't the most sanitary conditions, and they were not the most comfortable positions. I felt like I was really out of place, though. I mean, I can look back now and see that I had behavioral problems, but I was not mentally ill. I can easily say that many of the other boys and men in the asylum were. Like me, they were all scheduled to have a kind of brain surgery that we know of as a lobotomy. It wasn't explained to me in detail, but I know now what it is. And I'm sure that most people listening to this story will know what it is. My surgery was scheduled for 5 days after I was put into the asylum. But being as I didn't know what a lobotomy was at the time, I wasn't fearing it as much as I was fearing the activity of the other boys in the room. One boy, who was just a few years older than me, didn't really talk. He would just sit on his bed and stare at someone, and he would keep his stare unbroken for a very long time. Whenever he stared at me, I would just do my best to pretend that I didn't notice. However, it didn't really work very well. It should have concerned me that once the boys who had the surgery were brought back into the room, they were very non-responsive. They just lay there and stared at the ceiling. When the doctors would try to talk to them when they were awake, they didn't acknowledge them at all. However, I wasn't aware of what someone was supposed to be like after surgery. Had I known what was awaiting me in a matter of days, I probably would have begged and screamed for someone to let me out of the asylum. I would have promised that I would never misbehave ever again. The night before the surgery, I was having a hard time sleeping. I was awoken in the middle of the night by something. I wasn't sure. It was like a feeling. I woke up, and the staring boy was on my bed, and his face was only inches from my face. I screamed in surprise and tried to jump out of the bed. He quickly grabbed my hand and sank his teeth into it, ripping the flesh apart in my hand. I screamed as I tried to pull my hand away. The orderlies had to come in and force the boy off of me, although it ruined a good portion of my hand. I had to have surgery on my hand, and the pain was horrendous. The next thing I recalled was waking up in my bed. My hand was stitched up and in bandages. I looked over at the bed of the staring boy, and he was in bed, and he was awake. But he wasn't staring at anyone. He was simply looking up at the ceiling. I was scared when I first saw him, but then noticed there was definitely nothing to worry about. He was in no position to attack me again. I was checked out of the hospital by my parents without ever having received the lobotomy. They had changed their minds after my incident. It wasn't until many years later that I found out exactly what I had almost had happen to me. I'm fortunate that the incident with my hand had happened, because that was what forced my parents to change their mind and not have the lobotomy. I still have a huge scar on my hand, but I am thankful for it. Number 2. The Threat. This isn't a story for the weak of heart or stomach. I mean, it's not as gruesome as it could have been, but it is still pretty bad. I've always had the most unfortunate pleasure of dating the exact wrong women in life. But the worst one was this girl named Natalie, who was a bit of a psychopath. And that's not just sour grapes on my part. She really was out there. I didn't notice it when we first started dating, as if she was putting on a persona or something. But a few months after our first date, she just began getting really weird and possessive. For example, we were in college at the time, and she became obsessed with me. I remember once, coming out of a 2-hour lecture, I turned my cell phone on right away. I was shocked to have about 20 text messages from her in that 2-hour time period. Each one progressively got worse. The first was like a simple, "Hey there," and the last one was her accusing me of having sex with another girl. I called her back and reminded her that I was in a lecture and my phone was off. Her demeanor calmed down pretty quickly, and she was suddenly asking if I wanted to come hang out at her dorm. I think that if this had happened just once, I probably would have just written it off to a minor insecurity. But after a week or so, it happened again. And it was worse this time. And it kept happening again and again. If it wasn't happening in class, then it was happening while I was hanging out with my friends. There were a couple times when I was trying to get some sleep because I had exams the following day, and she wouldn't stop trying to check on me over and over again. Even when I told her that I was sleeping, it didn't stop her at all. And every time I explained to her what I was doing, she would snap back to seemingly being trusting again. So with this happening over and over again, I'm sure that some of you are wondering why I stayed with her. Well, a couple reasons. It was several months after we began dating that she began acting this way. We had some great months before it all, and I thought she was just going through a phase. Once she had gotten over all of this, I thought it would go back to the way it was before. And the second thing was that the sex between us was very, very good. I mean, it was pretty much worth putting up with all of the crap that came along with it. It was actually when we were together and about to have sex that I finally had too much. We were making out and stuff, and she told me she had a present for me. She reached into her purse and pulled out the strangest thing. I had an idea of what it was when she showed it to me, and she confirmed that it was a male chastity device. She wanted me to wear it whenever we weren't together. You know, to make sure that I wasn't screwing around. I immediately refused. My body is my property, and I would never give anyone that sort of control over it. She got mad at me and promptly left the dorm room. I assumed that would be the last time that I ever saw her. About a week later, Natalie called me up and apologized for asking me to wear the device. She had said it wasn't because she didn't trust me, just that she thought that it was a kinky idea that she really wanted to try. She was sorry for getting so upset and hoped that we could see each other again. I should have said no. I really should have. But like I mentioned, the sex was good enough that I was willing. So she came over for dinner and brought a bottle of red wine. Yeah, I'm a wine drinker, and she knew my weakness. I can't say I remember a whole lot about the date, actually. We ordered a pizza, and ate some and had some wine. I remember kissing a little bit. And that was the last thing before everything just got wonky and dark. The next thing I knew, I was lying in bed and I couldn't move my arms or legs. I was still woozy, but was able to tell that something was binding me to the bed. I looked over and saw Natalie sitting on my bed. She was holding the chastity device in one hand and a scary, damn-looking knife with the other. She told me that she was giving me a choice. Either I wear the device, or she'll have to cut it off. It was then that I realized that I was naked in the bed. I cussed at her, called her a crazy whore or something, but I refused to wear her damn chastity device. I demanded she release me and then get the hell out of my dorm room. Yes, I realize now that was stupid. She didn't even ask the question again. She set the device down and used that hand to grab my penis with. The knife came towards it, and I actually felt it cut me. I yelped, but was really too weak to scream. Otherwise, I would have called for help. I really believed right then that she was gonna cut it off. So I began begging her to let me wear the device. I would do anything, just don't cut my dick off. She took the knife and made as if to cut me again, and asked if I really meant it. I assured her I did. She told me if I was lying, I wouldn't get a second chance. Next mistake, and I would lose everything. I agreed, begging. So she put the knife down. She went about putting the device on me. I was in a state of retraction, should we say, so it was easy. She unhandcuffed me and told me how happy she was that I changed my mind. She said she knew I wouldn't go to the cops or anything, because then I'd have to explain why I was wearing the chastity device. She took her things, left, and told me she would call me the next day. I did manage to get up, and I was able to get someone else in the dorm to drive me to the campus hospital. The cut on my penis was pretty nasty, and I actually needed stitches. After they got the chastity device removed, Natalie was arrested, and you bet your ass I pressed charges. She was kicked out of the college as well, and after the court case, I have never seen her again. I still have a scar, though. No, I won't show it to you. Number 3. Tommy. When I was a teenager, I guess I hung out with the sort of kids that you would call goth. I never thought of them like that, of course. Neither did they ever identify themselves as such. But they were dressed in black and acted like they were depressed. I mean, I guess they probably were depressed, but I'm not sure there was anyone who was more depressed than any other teenager generally was. They just liked to talk about it all the time. I guess one of the reasons I hung out with them, although I wasn't really like them, was because I was gay. I lived in a small suburban town, and it really wasn't yet as accepted to be gay as it is now. Goth guys, punk guys. They were the type of guys that I could express myself around better and not feel like I was in danger. And I guess another reason was because of Tommy. He was one of the goth guys, and I had a huge crush on him. He would sit at the back of class in school and just brood for like hours. I don't know why I found that so attractive, but I did. I guess I also stared at him a whole lot. Not too shocking, really, but I really didn't realize that I was doing it. I guess that was something to do with why he asked me if I wanted to hang out with his friends. Honestly, he never told me exactly why. I guess I wasn't too different than they were. One day, they were having a party. I mean, they called it a poetry reading, though, and I was invited. Eventually, Tommy and I ended up in a room together by ourselves. We spent hours and hours talking with the lights off. It was amazing, and I didn't want it to end. He always wore long-sleeved black shirts, and after a while, told me he wanted to show me something. He began taking his shirt off, and I know I felt my heart beating hard in my chest. But he wasn't coming on to me. He was just showing me that his arms, his chest and stomach were all covered in scars and wounds. He had bandages on some of them. When I asked what happened, he just explained that he liked cutting himself. I, of course, wondered why, and I should have been quite disturbed by his answers. But I was just so taken with him that I wasn't. He told me that he thinks that people need to cut themselves in order to get the bad things out of his body. He felt that by cutting his flesh and bleeding, he was exorcising himself of negativity, disease, and everything bad. He told me I should try it sometime. I told him I would think about it, but I just wasn't ready to at the moment. I like to think that Tommy and I were really close after that. I was very happy whenever I was able to spend time with him. Whenever he would make new cuts in himself, he would always let me know about it. And he would always ask me if I was ready to try it. I wasn't. I figured I could keep saying no, as long as I wanted, and there would be no problem. So, about 3 months after the poetry reading, Tommy, me, and the other friends were all hanging out in a playground after midnight. Tommy and I went to the far side, on the merry-go-round, and spent a lot of time talking. It was that night that he did something that I had never seen. He took his shirt off again and pulled a pocket knife out of his pocket. He used it to cut a really long gash in his left arm. I was shocked, but he was laughing at it. Watching me, he held his arm up to me and asked me if I wanted a drink. Now, before any goth listeners get angry, I'm not confusing goth kids and vampire kids here. Tommy saw this as a sort of blood brother thing. I didn't really want to, but he kept on urging me. And that was when I knew that Tommy knew I had the hots for him. He took his leg and started rubbing it on mine, and told me that sharing each other's blood is the most intimate thing two people could ever do. Only somewhat convinced, I finally held out my arm to him. And this is where things get a bit confusing for me. I had never been cut with a knife before, and although I knew it was painful, I was not prepared for how painful it really was. When he put the knife into my arm, when it pierced the skin, the pain was unbelievable. And I jerked my arm up and then away from Tommy. The knife tore a huge gash into my arm. It was deep, and blood came flooding out of it. Freaked, Tommy pulled the knife out. He had some bandages, because he had planned this, and he tried to compress it as best he could, and he called his friends over. They wanted to call an ambulance, but Tommy was too freaked out that he might go to jail. His friends told him if I died, manslaughter would be much worse than an accident. Upon hearing that word, I guess Tommy completely pussed out and took off running. His friends called him back, but he wouldn't come back. At some point after that, I began blacking out, and I was convinced I would die. I came to a while later, and all of Tommy's friends were there. They noticed me open my eyes and told me an ambulance was on its way. They held the bandages up to my arm. I had never had stitches before. It looked completely awful. I had to talk to the police, and they told me the friends had told them that their buddy Tommy had done this and ran off. I told them it was an accident, though. Although I was upset that Tommy abandoned me, possibly to die, I wasn't mad enough at him to get him in trouble. We did a really stupid thing, but he hadn't intended to hurt me that badly. There was no doubt of that. I told them we were just going to be blood brothers, and I reacted badly to the cutting. Fortunately, no one got in trouble. Tommy disappeared for a while, and I didn't see him for about 2 weeks. He showed up outside my bedroom window. He hadn't even been home during that period of time. I assured him that I wasn't going to get him in trouble, and he was thankful. He told me he would see me the next day and left. I didn't see him the next day. I never saw him again. He ran away from home. I thought it was odd because I hadn't blamed him for what happened. But I guess maybe he had planned on leaving and just wanted to be forgiven beforehand. I don't know. I really don't. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. Well, it's been a while since I've had some sort of story where some guy's junk gets hurt. I know for a while in my earlier days, it seemed like a theme was occurring. For those of you who haven't been with me long, you might not know, but I actually had a small reputation for having those sorts of stories. Anyhow, I originally was going to give the video the title Unnecessary Surgery Stories, but I couldn't justify the title with the stories therein. I do hope you enjoyed it. I know some people have wanted KOC shirts for a cheaper price. My sister set up some Valentine's shirts at the Represent store, linked in the description. The code ILOVEKOC will secure the discount. As far as videos, I am planning on getting the subscriber video out tomorrow or Wednesday, and then a video that shows the large amount of wonderful KOC fan art the following day. So keep a lookout for those. If you'd like to read print versions of these stories, please check out the Killer Orange Cat subreddit in the link provided in the description. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please hit the subscribe button below, or use the icon of Ichigo that will appear at the end of this closing. For those who don't know, Ichigo is my cat. Feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter using the links in the description. If you have a story you like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any other YouTube channel. And please, whatever you do, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.